Hello, my event friends. Welcome back to a new episode. Today we have our special guest, Devon Pasha, with us. Devon Pasha, CMP CED, is a highly experienced and accomplished event professional with a wealth of knowledge in the industry. She's a certified meeting professional, CMP, and certified event designer, CED, with a proven track record of success in planning and executing a wide variety of events. With a keen eye for detail and passion for delivering exceptional experiences for her clients, Devon is known for her ability to bring creative and innovative ideas to the table. She's a skilled communicator and leader who excels at building strong relationships with clients and partners. Thank you, Devon, for taking out time and getting on EvaTalk. I can surely say that she does build great relationships. Just backstage, we were talking about, I don't know what all topic. Welcome to the talk here, Devon.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that really warm welcome and introduction. And sometimes it's nice to hear like, oh, yeah, maybe I do some of that on a daily basis, in addition to all
Yeah,
the work that goes into building that
yeah.
type of resume and bio. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, Devon. So I think we are good to start. And I
Okay.
am going to put my first question for you. Could
Okay.
you please walk us through your professional journey and how you got into event design?
So, it's so funny when I was thinking about the answer to this question and I was practicing with my husband. He said,
Oh,
your journey started way before you became a professional. And I was like, that's right. My story goes back to when I was actually a little girl. I have two
oh,
very strong grandmothers who were
okay.
both into hostessing and hospitality. My maternal grandmother, Hilda, was a homemaker and a home economics teacher. And I
Okay.
loved being in her home. She always had such a beautifully appointed space and the natural light and always having everyone's favorite food or drink at the ready. And it just, you could definitely sense in her home that people felt welcome and they felt that sense of belonging, and everyone had a smile instantly upon
Oh,
entering her space. And I think that was very impactful because you could see how the power of hostessing, the power of belonging and welcoming, feeding, caring for someone really increased their smile. It made them feel special, and that was very impactful. I wanted to be the person who could elicit
yes.
those emotions and feelings from someone. My paternal grandmother, Martha, was a dedicated educator, really strong into women's rights, women's education, psychology. And she was a bit of a socialite. And I remember going to her very well appointed Philadelphia brownstone in the cool neighborhood and watching her, hostess and connect people. She was a great connector. I actually met a
Okay.
couple that she connected and ended up marrying a few years later.
Hmm.
But it kind of taught me the power of human connection and how
Yes.
you could be a catalyst towards connection, conversation, creativity, powerful conversations, and maybe even love. Who knows if that's a
Yes.
if that's a bonus. But from these two impacts, I think that was really developmental and impactful upon me. So I started my professional event career in college. I really wanted to. I actually joined a catering company. It was a collegiate job, and met two of my
Okay.
favorite mentors, the head chef, Bob Haduka, and the general manager, Sandra Donahue, who is still my friend to this day, 20 years later, a mentor and teacher of mine. And they kind of noticed that I just had this sparkle. I had a knack, and they both took me under their wings and they taught me everything they could about hospitality. So by my senior year of, in a beautiful academic, women's institution, I had found my career goal, which was to go into hospitality. And they both kind of helped me find my footing. And you take those jobs and you learn from each one: restaurants and catering facilities, country clubs, general managing, hostessing, bartending, and you put together this wonderful
Yes.
tapestry. Fast forward to the pandemic, and I really wanted to take that next step in my career. And I met two wonderful women, Janet Sperstad and Joanne Dennison, who said that, the next step to really take, aside from learning the industry and learning from your mistakes, was to get your certifications and to take that step into being certified within the industry. So I studied for my CMP and received that in December of 2020. And the next was to start my master's program and apply for my certified event design designation in 2021. And
Oh, that's
those two
great.
arcs, thank you. Like it really takes you from, I think, from a member of the industry to understanding what our industry values in terms of education and in terms of
Yeah.
what you need to be certified and get those designations to speak the language internationally, that I know knowledge that you know, and you know that I have knowledge, and we can respect that wealth of knowledge in each other. And so that's
Yes.
how I got, from a wee young 17, year old or 5-year old in my grandmother's lab to 17 in college, and learning about the industry, fast forward to, my late 30s, and
Yeah.
having, learned a lot from experience, but also taking the time to invest in myself in that education and add all those
Which
pieces
is
up
very
to,
essential.
yeah, but it's taking the time to learn about what you want to learn and what designations you want that add to your own mental and emotional
Yeah.
educational portfolio.
Yes, which is great to hear. And of course, this is one thing I think we've heard a lot, that, people land up in this industry very abruptly. They may not know, and they're here and they're doing great, just like you. And this one thing that you said, that, the human touch and the feeling of belongingness is where this industry is working around, which is great. Now, with this, I have my next question, Devon.
Mhm.
That is, in your experience, what is the most important factor to consider when designing an event?
I think the most important factor, and what I teach and preach on a daily basis, is that events are about changing behavior. And I think that's a really crystalline point to express when designing events. Um, and to clarify for those listening who may not be familiar with the language that we use in our industry, or with the event design collective itself, is that there's designing and there's planning, and those are not synonymous terms.
Yes.
One of my founders likes to say that designing an event is like creating the sheet music for the orchestra to play. I like to use the analogy that event design is of being an architect of a beautiful space, but you give the plans to the team who's going to construct the building. So the
Yes.
core of event design is understanding the stakeholders, how they are before you've interacted with them, and how you'd like them to be after, and crystallizing that change, that delta, and making sure that they experience that with you at that pivotal moment of the event, so that you can impact their behaviors when they've left you. And the real
Yes.
change happens in between those events and not necessarily at the event itself. But that's the, to just boil it down to its sort of beautiful goodness, that crystalline point, which is events are all about changing behaviors.
Yes, it is. It is. And with years to come, it is going to be, really important. So we got to know how designing is important. Now, with this, I have another question. How has the event industry evolved to meet the needs of modern audiences?
I think we've done a good job of pivoting away from being entertainers. And I think there's
Yes.
maybe still some C-suite executives who think of like, oh, the event team is just party planners. They plan great parties and they pick beautiful napkins and the food is always delicious. And and I think some of us are getting caught up to the fact that events are essential tools of the industry and across multiple platforms: corporate, not for profit, association, public sector, utilizing events, in the public sector, utilizing events as educational tools, marketing tools. And it's understanding that bringing people together to create a micro community and expressing something to that community, teaching that community, bonding that community. That's how events are evolving to meet these modern needs, but also understanding that there's a human aspect. And not to harp on the pandemic, I know we all are ready to close that chapter and move on, but there are some really wonderful educational opportunities about human nature and who we are as people. And that crosses all boundaries, language barriers, countries, and cultures, that we are human beings. And bringing people together is an essential part of the human experience. And how do you utilize that new knowledge going into our bright and shiny future about understanding humans and that very basic anthropological need to be together? And yes, we pivoted and we figured out how to bring you together from all over the world with hybrid events, or
Hybrid events,
purely,
exactly.
yeah, and purely online events. And how can you create experiences in a digital environment that still
Yeah.
feels like you're creating a micro community, you're creating a sense of belonging, you're still getting an emotional response, even if we're looking at a screen and not standing next to one another.
Next to each other, yes.
And so we're learning that you can, but it's still about the human on the other side of the screen that needs to be impacted, that needs to feel connected, that needs to connect with someone or feel or learn. And I think that's where we are, is we've learned from this in such a way that it's going to make modern events and experiences and immersive experiences that much more powerful.
That was great. And if I may ask, how do you feel about the engagement of hybrid events or maybe just virtual events? What do you think about it? Do you think it was easier in the physical concept to like engage people through these events?
I think that all of these styles of events have a place within our culture. And I think it's important to remember that for some people, um, being able to still attend with less barriers to entry makes them feel a closer part of the community, especially for communities that may be spread very wide. I do come from a higher ed space. What was great in the virtual time is that we had attendees joining us that we've never met in person, who we might never have met in person because we don't go to their home city on a roadshow, and they may
Yeah.
not fly to us on a regular basis. But all of a sudden, those barriers to entry were gone, so they could rejoin the community in a virtual sense with, no more than their internet connection, and all of a sudden they're back to being an active part of the community. So you don't want to lose that engagement by going fully back in person. At the same time, you do want to create that sense of in-person energy and creativity and evoking emotion together. So it's important to remember who you are trying to engage, what is the purpose of that event, and then picking and prototyping a style of event that helps to reach, the goals of those
Multiples.
stakeholders.
Yes.
And understanding if they're a primarily virtual audience, that maybe prototyping that type of style would be more beneficial for their behavior change or the desired results.
Yes. And I feel somehow or the other, hybrid events have got a lot of communities more together. The ones we could not even reach, like far off. Even today, you and I are connecting through this virtual mode. And yes, Floor is helping us connect to different parts of the country at very extreme time zones. So, yes, I suppose it is helpful in a lot of ways. With
Yeah.
which, I have another question for you. Can you share some tips with our listeners for creative event planning that can drive engagement?
I'm happy to share tips. I would like to mention that I've been studying creativity at Drexel University, and I highly recommend for all planners and designers in our industry to make sure you understand what you mean when you say creativity. Um, there are personal definitions, there are official research definitions, but is it creativity? Is it idea generation? Is it innovation within your industry? So It's all about what word you're choosing. It's all about what you want and what is the desired effects. With that said, creativity to me is all about putting together your lived experience connected to someone else's lived experience to prototype experiences that are impactful, that move the needle for your organization. Um, Oftentimes, what we don't do is allow enough time for that incubation to happen. And so we say, okay, we're going to meet at 10 a.m. on Monday and we're going to brainstorm. And you pitch the problem and expect results in the same hour. And I
Yes.
hope everyone listening can think through that scenario, and you go to that meeting and you're sitting there like, oh, bleep. I don't know. And you leave that meeting, which was a slog and just like excruciatingly painful because you don't really know, and you're on the bus or the train or you're in the shower, like, oh my God, that's it. I have this idea. And that's
Yes.
because now you've incubated the problem and it's sitting in your subconscious and, you know, filing around in all your mental filing cabinets of all the memories and experiences, emotions you have. But in the front of your brain, into your front reactive beta brain, there's a steel door like Fort Knox, and it's like locked closed most of the day because most of the day you're reacting. And in the shower or on the bus before you go to sleep, that steel door becomes a bit of a mesh trap. And as soon as there's a little gap, that idea comes rushing forward because it's
Yes.
like amazing. So, what I would say is that you need to find opportunities to present the problem, to allow discussion of the problem so you understand it from multiple sides. And then you need to take a break from the problem. And I say problem in a way that it doesn't have to be bad necessarily, but what are we noodling with? What is that sort of
Yes.
fuzzy 3D issue, problem, meaty kind of thing we need to chew on? And then you need to break from it. Bring brainstorming back in 2 days, in a week.
Yes.
And then ask people, if you are at all inspired, text me. I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you had a dream about it and you wake up, text me, write it on a post it, send me a picture of it, call me from the shower, doesn't matter. But allow that time that when you are inspired with the idea, that you take all of them and you put them together and then you go back and you revisit. And what you find is that one, you're validating the ideas when they come, which is not
Yes.
forced in the moment. And then you take time to kind of mush them all together and does this fit here and does this fit here? And then I might see your idea and be like, oh, but what if I fixed my idea and I twisted it this way and I put it together with yours? Now we have a better idea. And the better idea answers 4 parts of the problem instead of 2 parts of the problem. So you need the
Yes.
opportunity to start the ball rolling and let people's ideas bounce off of one another and build towards creativity. But you have to make sure you follow the process and allow it to sink in.
All right. I suppose that was really inspiring. And yes, your point of, let the brainstorming happen. Because, of course, when you get the problem, you try to move around what solutions can be there. So, of
Right.
course,
That sort of
this was,
engineering, like, this is the problem, this is the answer.
this
But
is,
this is the answer from
yes.
my perspective. And you're looking at the
Yeah.
problem from the other side of it and say, like, no, this is the answer. But we're only
Yes.
seeing this in sort of like a 2D environment. You have to allow opportunity for you to see it from all sides and understand that your answer is correct and my answer is correct, but only from a single perspective. So how do we
Yeah.
bring in other perspectives from the top, from the bottom, and from the sides? And you really do have to let it steep. I mean,
Yeah.
who would say, make me a cup of tea, pour some water, dunk one tea bag in, and be like, here's your tea? We're like, I don't know who taught you how to make tea, but that's not accurate. Like, you need to,
Yeah.
the flavor improves up to a point of perfection as you let it steep, right? And that's kind
Yes.
of, you really have to let the problem brew before you get to that point.
I totally agree with this, and that was something like a tip for the year that we should always be working around the brainstorming, because until unless we are working on the problem,
Mhm.
thinking about it, I suppose the best of the solutions are not going to arrive. All right, Devon. Now, with this, I have a similar kind of, question that is in my mind, and that's what strategies can event planners employ to create an experiential event design?
I think it goes back to understanding that human nature, understanding the who. If you don't know who is coming or who you're designing for and what their desired behavior is when they left you, it's really hard to understand what to design. Um, Oftentimes a lot of problems or frustrations within the industry is that, this was the problem, here is the solution, so we need to have dinner for 400 people, and you just go, okay, solution is find a space, find a caterer, put some tables in, and have dinner. But what you didn't understand is this group of people has a specific set of needs, or you didn't ask enough questions to understand them, to empathize with them, to really get through like what are their pain points, and how does this event, how do these experiences alleviate their pains? What are their expectations going into the event? How do you satisfy those expectations? So it's not as simple as taking the order. And I think that's what a lot of planners or planning teams are kind of relegated to is please go plan the gala. Needs to be for 400 people. We'd like it to be semi-formal. We'd like it to be in April, and check, check, check. Oh, and would you like fries with that? Like, you know, so when you check all the boxes and your event owner comes or your stakeholders come, they're like, what is this? Or why is it here? Why did you pick this page? Why are we having chicken? I clearly wanted beef. It's like, okay, but here's the checklist that you gave me. I technically checked all the boxes. And it's like, yes, you technically did. But without that strategy piece and also figuring out how this one experience fits into the entire plan for your organization, because the event is not
Yes.
existing in a vacuum. This is a pivotal
It's
moment
going
in the
to be an impression.
yeah, of the whole year. So if you're going to spend
Yeah.
internal resources, and I want to stress that you as a planning team, a design team member, a program manager, accountant, gifts and records, you are an internal resource, and your times and energies get spent in the production, planning, strategy, and design of that experience. So before you go spinning all these wheels, where does this pivotal moment of change fit into the entire strategy for the year? How does it fit into the
Yes.
strategic plan for the organization? If the strategic plan goes out to 2027 or 2030, how does this incremental change plus the next incremental change get us to goal? So when you start to think of the event like that, instead of this is just the annual gala, it gives
Yeah.
you the strategy to understand what has to happen here that will snowball to the next one where we will employ this part of change. And that gets us one day, one event at a time, each step towards the strategic goal of the organization. So that's what I would
Yes.
say.
Totally,
Always remember
totally
the
agree.
who, and remember that this is a piece of a strategic plan, that this is a tool to use to reach your goals.
Yes, of course. As we say, events don't work around the first impression, they work around the last impression, what you're
Exactly.
going to give them, and how the next years to come are going to work around it. So, yes,
Exactly. Yes.
totally.
The recency effect, the last impression you give them is the one they'll remember the most. So make sure the last impression pushes them towards that desired behavior change so that in that incubation period between these touch points, they're feeling, thinking, doing, and saying what you want them to do because you've given
Yes.
them these impactful experiences and they are changing towards the rate of success for your organization.
Yes, totally, totally agree. All right, though it's my very last question, but of course, a very important one. I would like to know some tips or any advices for aspiring event designers on how to develop their creativity and skills in the field?
I was thinking the most about this question because I was wondering, for those of us who maybe don't have as many mentors or haven't been long in the industry, what would be the most impactful to say? So this one I made notes on because I really wanted to make sure that, for your younger audience members or for new industry members, that this would be as impactful. But the first one was to learn to push back. And that kind of goes back to my point of reactive order taking versus proactive strategic partner. I wish someone had when I was younger said, you can ask questions. You should push back. If you're not getting the information you need to do your job well, the event is not going to be that pivotal moment of change. It's not going to fit into the strategy within your organization. So be brave, be fearless, raise your hand in the meeting, ask the question, shoot the event owner an email and say, I have a point of clarification. Could you answer for me, please?
Yeah.
And make sure to keep asking. And I think, and maybe this is a cultural thing, but, sometimes we see people who ask a lot of questions as being challenging. But be challenging. Be that voice and ask the next why. Oftentimes, what we're presented with is what the client or our superiors or what we think the event wants. But if you ask why, well, why do you want that? Why do you want that? And you dig a little deeper and you crack through that sort of surface want. If you find 3 or 4 more whys, you get down to what they need. And when you assess the need versus the want, your designs will be more impactful. The prototypes that you create will give more guidance to your planning team. And for those of you asking or thinking like, well, I don't have a designer and I'm the planner, you can wear both hats. You can take some time to design well, to validate the designs, to validate your understanding of your stakeholders before you go into planning. And if you take the time to do that, if you maintain the alignment with your event owner, with your main stakeholders, you'll find that the path that you have to pave towards that pivotal moment of change is easier to do because you can look at your designs and say, okay, I know this is what I need to do. I know this is what the desired effect. Does this decision impact my desired effect? Not this one. I'll save that for later. Does the idea of my colleague, I always say, I went to an event and they had this amazing magician and we should hire them for our event. It's like, that's a great idea. Let me check our design and see, does having a sleight of hand magician help us elicit the desired behavior for this event? I don't think it fits perfectly to get us where we need to be, but thank you so much for bringing this great information to us. Let's put it in our idea quarantine, or let's put it in a quarantine for later, because I know that will be a perfect piece of entertainment for a different stakeholder, but it doesn't quite
Yeah.
fit for this one. Now you have this compass for which you can, kind of have within yourself. So give yourself the opportunity to ask questions, be bold and brave. Um, don't fall in love with the first solution to the problem, because it probably means that, like, yes, it's a great idea from one perspective, but scrap it and see if you can think of another one. What that will do is that starts to work out your own creative engine. And if you can scrap an idea and come up with a different one from a different perspective, what you're doing is you're mentally training yourself to create different prototypes and to always fall in love with the problem and see if you can take it from different sides and see
From
how many
different
solutions you can come up with. So always validate the ideas of your team members. Always ask questions. Be challenging. Get the information that you need. Dig deeper to determine needs versus surface wants. And work out your own creative engine. Make sure you find time to open that steel door and make that mesh so your ideas come flooding through. Keep a notebook, put sticky notes on a wall, keep a text journal to yourself, or have an idea accountability buddy that you text. But don't lose that creativity, bottle it up and save it, and go back to that Rolodex of ideas when you need inspiration. And the
When
last
it
thing I'll
fits, yeah.
say, yeah, about creativity is that you cannot be creative on a dime. The environment matters. So if you need to brainstorm, do one of three things. One, meditate for 1 minute, open the door. Two, color. I love coloring. Actually, it's the one activity I do love to do with my daughter because that sort of physical movement and the different colors brings back that childlike ideas where again you're kind of taking away. If you want the princess to be green and purple, she'll be green and purple. If you want the duck to be
Yeah.
blue, the duck will be blue. But you get to enact some creativity, and just that one creative act will open up the next one. And the last one would be to play. Throw a ball to
Okay.
yourself. You think of like the Googles and the Amazons that have the ping pong tables or the pool tables or a basketball court. That physical activity, that idea of play, that moving your body so that you keep the busy part busy with the game will actually open up the flow of ideas and allow the creativity come forward. So find 5 minutes before you have to brainstorm, play, color, meditate, but make sure you open that door up to allow for the flow of ideas.
I think that was really, really great to know. And some tips I am definitely going to take from it and apply in my day to day life. I think meditation is really important for your well being also. So, and it opens creative doors. So, why not? We should imply it. It was so good
Self-care and
talking.
work, like together.
Yes, yes. I suppose staying childlike and following what we were doing then is going to definitely help us with this industry in these days. So thank you, Devon, for sharing such great insights and such great tips to work around in the industry. It is, I suppose, going to help all our listeners and event professionals in the industry going to listen to this talk that, with the future coming events all throughout the year, they should be applying it. Thank you again for joining Eva Talk. And yeah, I
Thank you
suppose
so
that
much
was
for having
it.
me. To everyone listening, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to learn
Yeah.
more about, your journey in the industry and how we can connect and help each other be more creative or be more mindful or make better impacts. So please find me on LinkedIn, and thank you so much for having me on Eva Talks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and listening to our very interesting talk. We will be back soon with another episode. Till then, keep following 10 times. Thank you.